Sometimes, our passion and dedication lead us to the very edge of danger. This is precisely what happened to freelance photographer Robert Landsburg, who found himself standing too close to an active volcano at Mount St. Helens. His goal? To capture the awakening of this colossal giant, a pursuit that had driven him to the mountain since April. With unwavering determination, he climbed treacherous slopes, seeking good views and documenting the volcano's change over several weeks. The outcome? Stunning photos that witnessed nature's incredible fury. Yet, his relentless pursuit of the perfect picture led to a tragic event. What compelled him to get so close, and what became of those remarkable photographs amidst the chaos? Join us as we delve into the grappling tale of one man's passion, obsession, and the devastating forces of Mount St. Helens. On the morning of May 18, 1980, photographer Robert Landsburg set out on a 7-mile hike from the summit of Mount St. Helens, nestled in the Cascades mountain range. Armed with his trusty camera, he had a simple goal: to capture the gradual changes taking place in this picturesque landscape. At the time, the volcano seemed calm. It had been 4 days since any eruptions, with only the occasional release of gas from its vents, like a simmering pressure cooker letting off steam. Deep below the surface, seismic activity had been rumbling since late March. The northern face of the mountain was slowly deforming, causing it to bulge outward. About 6 miles to the north, the serene Spirit Lake sat, dotted with a few homes and cabins. Most of them were empty, as residents had evacuated. However, one stubborn soul, 83-year-old Harry R. Truman, refused to leave, staying put in his Mount St. Helens lodge. 5 miles from the summit, a United States Geological Survey, or USGS, volcanologist and geologist named David Johnston was stationed at an observation post. Over the past month, he had been carefully studying the volcanic gases, and he strongly advised officials not to reopen the surrounding area to the public. The story of Mount St. Helens' awakening began in 1980 with a series of small earthquakes. Prior to 1972, seismologists hadn't ever been monitoring this region for earthquakes. From January 1975 to early 1980, only 44 quakes had been recorded in this area. But in March 1980, things took a different turn. Small tremors, like the early notes of an ominous symphony, hinted at possible volcanic activity. Then, on March 20th, 1980, a 4.2 magnitude earthquake struck just northwest of the summit, triggering avalanches from the snowy peak. The next day, it happened again. Concerns grew, and the United States Forest Service, or USFS, wisely closed off access above the tree line due to fears of earthquake-induced avalanches. By March 24th, scientists were increasingly convinced that these earthquakes were a warning sign of renewed volcanic activity. Any lingering doubts were obliterated on March 27, when witnesses near the volcano heard a thunderous boom. This was a steam-driven explosion known as phreatic eruption, caused by magma rising underground and meeting groundwater, creating steam and pressure that eventually burst forth. A dark plume from the explosion soared an astonishing 7,000 feet above the volcano. The lead-up to the cataclysmic eruption of Mount St. Helens was marked by a surreal atmosphere. Tourists and curious onlookers gathered at viewpoints, such as Silver Lake, which was approximately 30 miles away from the volcano. The USGS described it as a carnival-like atmosphere, but beneath the spectacle, tension simmered. By March 31st, the situation had escalated to the point where Cowlitz County commissioners declared a state of emergency. Roadblocks were set up, and officials prepared for possible evacuations. Meanwhile, the USFS personnel received a barrage of calls from the public, ranging from frustrated cabin owners unable to access their properties within restricted zones to gamblers seeking information about the number of explosions in the past 24 hours. Despite these challenges, the tourists continued to flock to the area near the roadblocks, even after the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, reported 109 planes inside the restricted zone around the volcano on April 3, 1980. Businesses began considering legal action against officials due to the lost revenue caused by the blockade and the pressure to reopen certain areas mounted. The USGS and their monitoring team, led by David Johnston, resisted these calls. As April progressed, the explosions from the volcano slowly and eventually ceased. However, scientists and officials remained cautious. Surveys, both from the air and on the ground, revealed a troubling development: a bulge about 1 mile long and a half-mile wide on the northern side of the volcano. Some, including Johnston, feared this could signal a lateral blast rather than a central eruption. To closely monitor these changes, two USGS observational posts, Coldwater 1 and Coldwater 2, were established. Coldwater 2 was positioned just 5 miles north of the summit. On April 30th, a red zone was established, spanning from 3 to 7 miles from the peak. Only authorized personnel, including scientists and law enforcement, were allowed within this zone. The newly established blue zone, encircling the red zone, permitted limited access during daylight hours for loggers and property owners holding special permits. But on that ominous morning of May 18, 1980, as Robert Landsburg documented the volcano's deformation from his vantage point 7 miles away, Harry Truman remained steadfast in his Spirit Lake home about 6 miles north of Mount St. Helens. 5 miles from the summit, David Johnston was stationed at Coldwater 2, watching and waiting. At precisely 8:32 a.m., a 5.2 magnitude earthquake jolted the area, setting off a massive avalanche from the walls of the summit crater. This event destabilized the northern face of the volcano, causing it to quiver and almost liquefy. In a heart-stopping moment, the entire north flank slid away from the cone in a torrent of rocks and debris. For the first time in nearly a century, Mount St. Helens erupted with unimaginable force and fury. Vancouver, this is it!" Dave Johnston urgently transmitted these words over the radio just moments before the line went silent. It was a chilling message that would be etched into history as the eruption of Mount St. Helens unleashed its devastating power. With an unprecedented force, the volcano spewed ash and debris outward, obliterating everything in its path within a radius of about 6 miles from the summit. The extent of the blast extended even further, reaching approximately 12 miles, where nearly all remaining trees were forcefully toppled. Those few trees that managed to survive on the outer edges of the blast were left charred and scorched. About 7 miles away from the summit, Robert Landsburg found himself in a difficult position. As he watched the enormous wall of ash hurling towards him through his camera lens, he snapped a few last photos. Swiftly, he rewound the film back into his protective case, stashed his camera in his backpack, and lay down on top of it, a desperate attempt to shield the precious contents within. The pyroclastic flow, an avalanche of searing hot volcanic matter, engulfed Landsburg and his camera bag. His fate was sealed, along with that of countless others caught in the path of the eruption. Tragically, Landsburg, Johnston, and Harry Truman were among the 57 people who lost their lives that fateful day. Remarkably, the actions of Johnston and his dedicated monitoring team, who resisted immense pressure to reopen the area, likely prevented the death toll from reaching into the hundreds or even thousands. 17 agonizing days later, Landsburg's body was discovered, and while the film of his camera had suffered some heat damage, it remained miraculously intact. The haunting photographs he captured of the eruption and the encroaching wall of ash would later grace the pages of the January 1981 issue of National Geographic, forever preserving the memory of that dreadful day. Now, more than 4 decades have passed, and the scars left by Mount St. Helens are still healing. Wildlife has slowly begun to return to the once devastated blast zone as new vegetation takes root. However, some areas have never fully recovered. Mount St. Helens, once Washington State's 5th tallest peak, lost a staggering 1,300 feet from its former height of 9,677 feet, as reported by the USGS. The highest point on the crater rim now stands at 8,365 feet in elevation, a testament to the enduring power and ever-changing landscape of this volcanic titan. Did you find this intriguing? If so, stay tuned for more fascinating stories like this by liking and subscribing to our channel.